And that, esteemed colleagues, is why we must strike now. Grand Admiral Zix-Nax slammed his tentacle on the holographic projector, causing the image of Earth to wobble precariously. The humans are primitive, barely out of their stone age. Their defenses are laughable, their technology archaic. We will sweep through their solar system like a cosmic sneeze through a field of space dust. The assembled alien leaders murmured in agreement, their various appendages wiggling in what passed for applause in the Galactic Confederation, all except for one. With all due respect, Grand Admiral, came a quiet voice from the back of the room. I believe we may be underestimating our potential adversaries. The room fell silent. All eyes, stalks, and sensory organs turned to face the speaker, a small, unassuming alien with large, owl-like eyes and skin that shimmered like the surface of a soap bubble. Ambassador Quibble Zix-Nax sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. I wasn't aware the diplomatic corps had a say in military matters. Perhaps you'd like to share your expertise with the rest of us. Quibble gulped audibly, a sound that echoed through the cavernous war room. Well, you see, I've been studying Earth culture quite extensively, and I've made a rather startling discovery. I believe the key to understanding human strategy lies not in their military academies or their halls of government, but in a most unexpected place, their kindergarten classrooms. The room erupted in laughter. Tentacles slapped against carapaces, antennae quivered with mirth, and even the usually stoic rock beings from Granitus Prime rumbled with amusement. Kindergarten Zix-Nax chortled, his gill slits flaring. You mean to tell me that snot-nosed human larvae hold the secret to their planet's defense? Oh, this I have to hear. Quibble straightened his posture, his iridescent skin flickering with determination. I propose a covert mission. We'll disguise ourselves as human children and infiltrate one of their educational facilities. Only then can we truly understand the mind of our enemy. The laughter died down, replaced by a contemplative silence. Finally, Zix-Nax spoke, his voice a mix of curiosity and condescension. Very well, Ambassador, we'll humor your little experiment. But when it fails, and it will fail, we launch the invasion. Agreed. Quibble nodded, a small smile playing across his features. Agreed, Grand Admiral. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to brush up on my finger painting skills. All right, class. Settle down, MS. Honeydew's voice rang out over the cacophony of giggles, shrieks, and the occasional dinosaur roar. It's time for our new students to introduce themselves. The kindergarten classroom of Sunny Valley Elementary was a riot of primary colors and childish energy. Crayon drawings of misshapen animals and lopsided houses adorned the walls, and the air was thick with the scent of Play-Doh and apple juice. At the front of the room stood 5 very nervous-looking children. To the untrained eye, they appeared perfectly normal. To anyone paying closer attention, however, there were oddities. One girl's pigtails seemed to twitch of their own accord. A boy's skin had an almost metallic sheen. Another child's eyes were just a tad too large, and did they just blink sideways? Now, why don't you tell us your names and something special about yourselves, MS? Honeydew prompted, her smile warm and encouraging. The girl with the twitching pigtails stepped forward first. Greetings, fellow human larvae. I am Zoe, and I am proficient in quantum physics and intergalactic battle strategy. An elbow from one of her companions cut her off. I mean, I like ponies and the color pink. MS. Honeydew's smile faltered for just a moment before returning full force. How? Nice, Zoe. Who's next? The boy with the metallic skin shuffled forward. My designation is KRTHAX. Christopher, I possess an exoskeleton capable of withstanding temperatures up to 10,000 degrees Kelvin and other elbow. Another course correction. I mean, I like trucks and can eat 3 whole cookies without getting sick. One by one, the children introduced themselves, each initial statement more outlandish than the last, each hurriedly covered up with some banal childhood interest. Finally, it was Quibble's turn. He had taken the form of a small boy with unruly red hair and freckles. Hello, everyone. My name is Quincy, and I'm very excited to learn from all of you. MS. Honeydew beamed. Well, isn't that lovely? Now, class, let's all give our new friends a big Sunny Valley welcome. The classroom erupted in a chorus of welcome to Sunny Valley. The disguised aliens exchanged nervous glances. What had they gotten themselves into? As the day progressed, the alien infiltrators found themselves increasingly bewildered by the intricacies of human-child behavior. They had expected to uncover complex battle strategies and advanced technological concepts. Instead, they were confronted with the impenetrable logic of "because I said so," the strategic importance of not stepping on lava represented by any non-blue floor tile, the devastating effectiveness of "I'm rubber, you're glue" in verbal combat, the mystifying power of cooties as a biological weapon. By the time recess rolled around, Grand Admiral Zix Nax aka Zooey was ready to call the whole thing off. "This is preposterous," she hissed to her companions as they huddled under the slide. "We've learned nothing of value, unless you count the fact that these tiny humans believe in an omniscient obese home invader who rewards good behavior with material goods." Quibble, or rather Quincy, shook his head. "Patience, Admiral. We've only scratched the surface. The true test will come during show and tell this afternoon." As if on cue, a shadow fell over their hiding spot. They looked up to see a small human girl, her hands on her hips and a mischievous glint in her eye. "What you're doing?" she asked, her voice dripping with suspicion. "Nothing," the aliens chorused, their voices an octave too high. The girl narrowed her eyes. "You're weirdos," she declared. Then, without warning, she reached out and tapped Zexnax on the shoulder. "Tag, you're it." And with that, she was off, sprinting across the playground with a peal of laughter. The aliens stared at each other in confusion. "What just happened, KRTH?" Christopher asked. Quibble's eyes widened in realization. "I believe we've just been inducted into some sort of ritual combat. Quick, spread out. Don't let her touch you again." And so, the galaxy's most feared military leaders found themselves engaged in a frantic game of tag, their carefully crafted disguises forgotten as they flailed across the playground, desperately trying to avoid the touch of a giggling 6-year-old. As the children filed back into the classroom after recess, Ms. Honeydew couldn't help but notice that the new students looked different. Zoe's pigtails were standing straight up, crackling with what looked like static electricity. Christopher's skin had taken on a distinctly bluish tinge. And was that steam coming out of Quincy's ears? She shook her head. It had been a long day, and she was probably just imagining things. Besides, it was time for everyone's favorite activity, show and tell. "All right, class. Who would like to go first?" A forest of hands shot up, accompanied by a chorus of "Me. Me. Pick me." Ms. Honeydew scanned the room, her gaze settling on one of the new students. "How about Quincy? Would you like to share something with the class?" Quibble gulped. This was it. The moment of truth. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a small, glowing orb. "This," he announced with as much gravity as his high-pitched voice could muster, "is a miniature representation of my home my hometown. It contains all the knowledge and wisdom of my parents." The class leaned forward, oohing and ahin at the pulsating sphere. Ms. Honeydew's eyebrows shot up. "My, that's quite an impressive snow globe, Quincy. Does it play music too?" Before Quibble could answer, a chubby hand shot up from the back of the room. "Ooh! Ooh! Can I go next, Ms. Honeydew, please?" The teacher nodded, relief evident in her voice. "Of course, Tommy. Come on up." A round-faced boy with a gap-toothed grin waddled to the front of the class. In his hands, he clutched what appeared to be a crude diorama made of popsicle sticks, glitter, and an alarming amount of glue. "This," Tommy announced proudly, "is my plan to take over the world." The alien infiltrators sat up straighter, their eyes and various other sensory organs fixed on the glittery monstrosity before them. Tommy continued, his voice rising with excitement. "First, we fill all the world's oceans with Jell-O. Then, we replace all the grown-ups' coffee with hot chocolate. Finally, we train an army of puppies and kittens to tickle everyone into submission." The class erupted in giggles and applause. Ms. Honeydew chuckled. "That's very creative, Tommy. Thank you for sharing." But as Tommy returned to his seat, Quibble noticed something odd. The other alien leaders were frantically taking notes, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and admiration. "Diabolical," Zixnax muttered. "Using the planet's own resources against it, and the psychological warfare of depriving the adults of their stimulants. Brilliant." KRTX nodded solemnly. and the use of indigenous fauna as a non-lethal subjugation force. We never considered such tactics. Quibble tried to interject. Guys, I don't think. But he was cut off as the next student bounded to the front of the class. It was the girl who had initiated the tag game at recess. In her hands, she held what looked like a jump rope tangled around a half-eaten lollipop. This, she declared, her eyes gleaming with mischief, is my patented Booger Blaster 3000. It can shoot yucky stuff up to a bazillion miles. The alien leaders gasped in unison. A biological weapon with that kind of range, Zixnax whispered, her voice tinged with awe and terror. We're outmatched. As the show and tell session continued, each presentation seemed to send the disguised aliens into further spirals of panic. A macaroni art project was interpreted as a blueprint for a devastating sonic weapon. A finger painting was seen as a map of secret underground bunkers. And when little Susie demonstrated her ability to burp the alphabet, K.R.A.T.S. nearly fainted, convinced it was some sort of coded message to sleeper agents. By the time the bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, the alien leaders were a mess of frayed nerves and shattered confidence. As they shuffled out of the classroom, Zixnax turned to Quibble, her eyes wide with fear. We must abort the invasion immediately, she hissed. These humans, they're not primitive at all. They're monsters, geniuses. We never stood a chance. Quibble opened his mouth to explain, to tell them that it was all just childish imagination, that they had misinterpreted everything. But as he looked at the genuine fear and respect in his companion's eyes, he hesitated. Maybe, just maybe, this misunderstanding could lead to something greater than he had ever imagined. You're right, he said solemnly. We should return to the Confederation at once and report our findings. The humans are clearly too advanced for us to challenge. As they activated their cloaking devices and snuck away from Sunny Valley Elementary, Quibble couldn't help but smile. Who would have thought that the galaxy's greatest superpower would be brought to its knees by macaroni art and booger jokes? The epilogue. The Galactic Confederation's war room was uncharacteristically quiet. The usual bustle of strategic planning and invasion preparations had been replaced by a somber stillness. At the center of the room, Grand Admiral Zixnax stood before the assembled alien leaders, her tentacles drooping with the weight of her words. Esteemed colleagues, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, I come before you today with grave news. Our mission to Earth has revealed a truth we were unprepared to face. The humans are not the primitive species we believed them to be. They are, in fact, tactical geniuses beyond our comprehension. A chorus of gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Zixnax raised a tentacle for silence. Their children, their very larvae, possess strategic minds that put our greatest generals to shame. They have weaponry we can scarcely imagine, defenses we cannot hope to penetrate, and a capacity for psychological warfare that chills me to my core. She gestured to a holographic display, which flickered to life, showing crude crayon drawings and glitter-covered dioramas. The alien leaders leaned in, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. Behold, Zixnax continued, the battle plans of Earth's youngest warriors. Note the cunning use of Jello as a means of immobilizing entire oceans. Observe the ingenuity of their booger blaster biological weapons, and tremble before the might of their tickle armies. The room erupted in panic chatter. But how, one leader cried out. How can we hope to stand against such advanced tactics? Zixnax shook her head solemnly. We cannot. That is why, effective immediately, I am recommending that we not only abort our invasion plans, but also seek to establish peaceful relations with Earth. Perhaps, if we approach them with humility, they might deign to share some of their wisdom with us. As the assembly buzzed with a mixture of relief and trepidation, Ambassador Quibble stood quietly in the back of the room, struggling to keep a straight face. He caught Zixnax's eye, and for a moment he thought he saw a flicker of understanding pass between them. Later, as the leaders filed out of the war room, still chattering about the unexpected turn of events, Zixnax pulled Quibble aside. You knew, didn't you? She asked, her voice low. You knew we were misinterpreting everything. Quibble's skin shimmered with barely suppressed amusement. I may have had an inkling, he admitted. Zixnax's gill slits flared in what might have been a sigh. I suppose I owe you an apology, Ambassador. Your unorthodox methods have saved us from making a terrible mistake. Oh, I don't know about that, Quibble replied with a wink. I think we've all learned something valuable. The humans have a saying out of the mouths of babes, "Of times come gems." Perhaps we needed to see the universe through the eyes of children to remember what's truly important. Zix-Nax considered this for a moment, then nodded. Perhaps you're right. Though I must admit, I'm rather relieved we won't have to face the dreaded Booger Blaster 3000 in actual combat. As they shared a laugh, a strange sound that mixed Quibble's chuckle with Zix-Nax's burbling giggle, neither of them noticed the small, blinking device attached to the underside of the war room table. A device that was, at that very moment, transmitting their entire conversation to a most unexpected location. Meanwhile, on Earth, in a top-secret facility buried deep beneath the Nevada desert, a group of high-ranking military officials and scientists huddled around a flickering monitor. The tinny voices of Zix-Nax and Quibble echoed through the room, eliciting a mixture of stunned silence and barely suppressed laughter. General Thaddeus Thunderbolt McAllister, a man whose scowl could curdle milk at 50 paces, was the first to speak. "Well, I'll be damned," he growled, his mustache twitching with what might have been amusement. It actually worked. Dr. Eliza Bright, the brilliant and slightly manic lead scientist of Project Playground, clapped her hands in glee. I told you all. Who's the crazy one now, huh?" The room erupted in a cacophony of voices. "But how did you know?" The transmitter in the macaroni art was genius. "Do you think they really believed the Jello strategy?" General McAllister raised a hand for silence. "All right, people. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Dr. Bright, would you care to explain to the rest of us mere mortals how exactly you managed to avert an alien invasion with finger paint and macaroni?" Dr. Bright's eyes gleamed with the special kind of madness reserved for those who had just been proven gloriously, improbably right. "It's simple, really," she began, pacing the room like a caffeinated panther. "We've known about the alien surveillance for years, but every time we tried to feed them false information through traditional channels, they saw right through it." She paused for dramatic effect, her wild hair seeming to crackle with electric excitement. "So I thought, why not use the one source of information they'd never suspect? The one place where imagination and reality blur so seamlessly that even the most advanced alien intelligence couldn't tell the difference." "A kindergarten classroom," General McAllister finished, shaking his head in disbelief. "Exactly," Dr. Bright exclaimed. "We filled that classroom with the children of our top scientists, strategists, and creative thinkers. We encouraged them to let their imaginations run wild during show and tell. And then we sat back and watched as the most advanced alien civilization in the galaxy was brought to its knees by macaroni art and booger jokes." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, a junior analyst in the back raised his hand tentatively. "But what if they had called our bluff? What if they had actually invaded?" Dr. Bright's grin turned positively feral. "Oh, my dear boy," she purred, "who said anything about bluffing?" With a flourish, she pulled a tarp off a nearby table, revealing what appeared to be a child's science project gone horribly, wonderfully wrong. It was a mess of wires, blinking lights, and... was that Jello? "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Bright announced with all the gravity of a circus ringmaster unveiling her star attraction, "I give you the Booger Blaster 4000. The 3000 model was just the prototype, you see." As if on cue, the device burbled ominously, a glob of something green and decidedly unpleasant forming at its nozzle. General McAllister's face cycled through an impressive array of emotions before settling on a mixture of awe and resignation. "Doctor," he said slowly, "I'm not sure whether to give you a medal or have you court-martialed." "Why not both?" Dr. Bright suggested cheerfully. "I've always thought stripes would look dashing with a medal." As the room dissolved into a mix of laughter, excited chatter, and hasty plans to weaponize playground equipment, no one noticed the small, owl-eyed child peeking through the crack in the door. A child whose skin seemed to shimmer ever so slightly, like the surface of a soap bubble. Quibble smiled to himself as he quietly closed the door. Humans, he mused, were far more fascinating and far more terrifying than anyone in the Galactic Confederation had ever imagined. Perhaps it was time to renegotiate his role as ambassador. After all, someone needed to protect the galaxy from the awesome power of Earth's kindergarten class. As he shuffled away, still in his perfect disguise as Little Quincy, Quibble couldn't help but chuckle. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all, and it was a humor that tasted suspiciously like grape-flavored Jell-O and just a hint of boogers. Epilogue to the Parent-Teacher Conference. MS. Honeydew sighed as she settled into her chair, bracing herself for the last parent-teacher conference of the evening. It had been a long day, filled with proud parents, squirming children, and more macaroni art than any sane person should have to endure. But this last meeting promised to be interesting. A knock at the door jolted her from her thoughts. "Come in," she called, plastering on her best teacher smile. The door creaked open, revealing a sight that made MS. Honeydew question her career choices, her sanity, and possibly the nature of reality itself. In walked what appeared to be a shimmering, translucent blob vaguely shaped like a human, wearing what could only be described as a three-piece suit made entirely of bubble wrap. Beside it floated a being that looked like a cross between an octopus and a disco ball, its tentacles wrapped around a comically oversized briefcase. "Greetings, Educator Honeydew," the blob burbled cheerfully. "I am Parental Unit Alpha, and this is my legal representative, Squid Pro Quo. We are here to discuss the progress of our offspring, designation Quincy." MS. Honeydew blinked slowly, her smile never wavering. After 20 years of teaching, she had developed a poker face that would make Vegas pros weep with envy. "Of course," she said smoothly, "please have a seat. Or float, whatever's comfortable." As the blob settled into a chair which immediately began to dissolve and the octopus disco ball hybrid hovered nearby, MS. Honeydew pulled out Quincy's file. She could do this. She was a professional. "Well," she began, "Quincy is a unique child. Very creative. His recent show and tell presentation on interstellar diplomacy was particularly imaginative." The blob wobbled in what might have been pride. Yes, our offspring unit has been fascinated by your planet's quaint customs. Tell us, has he successfully integrated with the other larvae?" SMS. Honeydew's eye twitched almost imperceptibly. "Quincy has made several friends, yes, though there was an incident last week involving the sandbox and what he claimed was a quantum singularity we had to call in a hazmat team." The octopus disco ball's tentacles rippled in what might have been amusement. Classic Quincy, it gurgled, always thinking outside the space-time continuum. As the conference continued, touching on subjects ranging from Quincy's excellent math skills, he's already mastered quantum calculus, to his struggles with Earth literature, the very hungry caterpillar is clearly propaganda for your planet's military-industrial complex, MS. Honeydew found herself re-evaluating her life choices. Finally, as the blob was in the middle of a long-winded question about the strategic applications of finger painting, MS. Honeydew held up a hand. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice calm but firm, "but I have to ask, are you aliens?" The room fell silent. The blob and the octopus exchanged what might have been a glance it was hard to tell, given their lack of discernible eyes. Finally, the blob spoke. "My dear Educator Honeydew, what a preposterous notion. We are simply alternative lifestyle enthusiasts with a penchant for creative cosmetics and unconventional fashion choices." MS. Honeydew nodded slowly. "I see. And the fact that Quincy's packed lunch last week contained what appeared to be live, squirming tentacles." "A cultural delicacy," the octopus disco ball chimed in quickly. "Very rich in omega-3 fatty acids and xenon." "Lots of xenon." "Right, MS." Honeydew said, closing Quincy's file with a decisive snap. "Well, I think we've covered everything. Quincy is a delight to have in class. His macaroni art is groundbreaking, and as long as he stops trying to upgrade the other children's DNA during recess, I'm sure he'll continue to thrive." As she showed the bizarre pair out, MS. Honeydew couldn't help but smile. In all her years of teaching, she'd dealt with helicopter parents, tiger moms, and every flavor of overbearing guardian in between. But intergalactic helicopter parents, that was a new one. Watching the blob and the octopus shimmer and wobble down the hallway, MS. Honeydew made a mental note to update her resume. After all, successfully mediated parent-teacher conferences with extraterrestrial lifeforms would look fantastic on a NASA application. As she turned to head back to her classroom, she nearly collided with a man in a crisp military uniform, his chest gleaming with medals. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice gruff but polite. "I'm General McAllister. I'm here about a special project. Tell me, what do you know about weaponizing playground equipment?" MS. Honeydew's smile never faltered. "General," she said sweetly, "why don't you come in?" I think it's time we had a little parent-teacher conference of our own. And as she ushered the bemused general into her classroom, MS, Honeydew realized that perhaps, just perhaps, she had found her true calling. After all, if she could handle alien parents and military conspiracies, how hard could saving the world be? The universe, it seemed, had a strange sense of humor. And at the center of it all was a kindergarten classroom, where the fate of galaxies was decided over juice boxes and nap time. MS. Honeydew chuckled to herself. She was going to need a lot more gold stars.